He shredded my contract, I shredded his legacy. My name is Esther. I was 32 years old when the man I trusted, the CEO of the company I helped build from nothing, shredded my contract in front of me. He said I was replaceable. He said the company was his vision, his dream, his empire. What he didn't know was that I had already built something much bigger. Something he couldn't see because he never really looked at me. Not as a person. Not as a creator. Just as a tool. This is the story of how his betrayal made me the most powerful woman in his world. And how silence became my greatest weapon. I was 26 when I joined TechVantage Solutions. It wasn't a fancy office back then. Just 12 people crammed into a shared workspace in downtown Boston, surviving on pizza from the corner shop and pure ambition. The air conditioning barely worked. We had 2 desktop computers for the entire team. But we had something more valuable than equipment. We had hunger. Richard Kane was the founder. Charismatic. Visionary. The kind of man who could convince you that water was wine and make you thank him for the privilege of believing. He was 41 then, with silver streaks in his hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. He had the ideas. Big, impossible ideas. And I had the execution. I was hired as a junior software engineer, but within 6 months, I was designing the entire logistics AI system that would become the company's backbone. While Richard pitched investors in expensive restaurants, I was in that hot office writing algorithms that predicted supply chain disruptions before they happened. I built systems that could route shipments through urban traffic faster than any human dispatcher. Systems that saved our clients millions of dollars. I worked 16-hour days. Weekends didn't exist. My younger sister would call and ask when I was coming home for Sunday dinner, and I'd realize I can't remember the last time I'd seen my family. My friends from university stopped inviting me out because I always said no. But I didn't mind. I believed in the mission. I believed in Richard's vision of revolutionizing logistics across North America and beyond. I believed that hard work would be rewarded. I believed that if I just kept my head down and did excellent work, success would find me naturally. TechVantage grew fast. Faster than any of us expected. Within 3 years, we went from 12 employees sharing 1 bathroom to 200 people across 3 floors of a modern glass building in Manhattan. Richard was on magazine covers. Forbes. Bloomberg. Even CNN did a feature. He gave TED Talks in San Francisco and keynote speeches in London. Investors from Silicon Valley flew to New York to throw money at him. We raised $15 million, then $50 million, then numbers that made my mother ask if I was sure this was legal. And every single time Richard spoke, every interview, every panel, every award acceptance, he talked about his breakthrough technology. My innovative approach to logistics challenges. My vision for connecting the continent. My algorithms that are changing how goods move. My name never came up. Not once. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Leadership gets the spotlight. That's how companies work. That's how the world works. CEOs are the face of the company. My colleagues knew my contributions. That was enough. Wasn't it? But it wasn't just the public credit. When patent applications were filed for our AI technology, Richard's name appeared first. Always. The paperwork would list him as primary inventor, and me as contributing engineer. When bonuses were distributed at the end of the year, mine was always marked adequate performance, while others received exceptional achievement. When promotions were announced, I was told I was too valuable in my current role to move up. I watched men I had trained get promoted above me. I watched people who joined after me get corner offices while I stayed in the engineering wing. I raised it once gently, in a one-on-one meeting with Richard. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because I had practiced what I would say for 3 days. Richard, I've noticed that on the AI patents, my contributions aren't fully reflected in the authorship. I designed the core algorithms, but the legal documents make it seem like I just assisted. He smiled. That warm, fatherly smile he used when he wanted to seem understanding. The smile that had convinced investors to bet millions on him. Esther, you're brilliant. Everyone knows that. Everyone in this company respects your work tremendously. But patents are complex legal instruments. We list names strategically for maximum corporate protection and investor confidence. It's not personal. It's just business structure. I nodded. I believed him. I was so naive. So desperate to believe that the world was fair, that hard work spoke for itself, that good people were rewarded. I went back to my desk and worked until midnight, trying to prove that I deserved better treatment by simply working harder. As if excellence alone could protect me. By the time I turned 31, the company had over 500 employees. Revenue was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. We had offices in 4 countries. Richard had moved into a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the New York harbor. He drove a Tesla, one of the first in the city. He wore custom suits and Swiss watches. Meanwhile, I still worked in the engineering wing, surrounded by servers and whiteboards covered in equations. I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. I didn't mind. I wasn't in it for the glamour. I was in it for the work. For the creation. For the satisfaction of solving impossible problems. Then the rumors started. Whispered conversations that stopped when I walked into the break room. Concerned looks exchanged between colleagues. Emails with vague subject lines like Organizational Efficiency Review and Strategic Restructuring Initiative. Layoffs. Restructuring. Optimization of human capital, the HR department called it in their carefully worded memos. I wasn't worried. Not really. I was the head of AI development. I had built the core technology that powered every single product we sold. I was untouchable. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday morning when I received the calendar invite. Strategic planning session with CEO Kane. Conference room A, 9 a.m. My heart raced when I saw it. This was it. This had to be it. The CTO position had been vacant for 8 months. Everyone knew I was the obvious choice. I had the technical expertise, the institutional knowledge, the respect of the engineering team. This had to be my promotion meeting. Finally, after 6 years of loyalty and sacrifice, recognition was coming. I wore my best blazer, the navy blue one I'd bought on sale 3 years ago and saved for important occasions. I practiced my acceptance speech in the bathroom mirror that morning. I even allowed myself to imagine the look on Richard's face when I negotiated for equity. Maybe I'd finally be able to afford a better apartment. Maybe I could take my mother on that vacation she'd been dreaming about. Maybe all the sacrifice would finally make sense. I walked into conference room A at 8:58 a.m. Always early. Never late. That's who I was. Richard was already there, sitting at the head of the long mahogany table. The morning sun came through the windows behind him, putting his face in shadow. No smile. No warmth. No congratulations. Just a manila envelope sitting in front of the chair across from him. Sit down, Esther. His voice was flat. Professional. The voice you use with strangers, not with someone who had spent 6 years building your empire. I sat. My hands were already trembling, though I didn't understand why yet. Some part of my body knew before my brain caught up. He slid the envelope across the polished wood. It made a soft sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. I opened it with numb fingers. The words on the letterhead swam in front of my eyes. Termination of employment. Effective immediately. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. Certain this was some kind of administrative error. Some paperwork mix-up that we would laugh about later. I don't understand, I finally said. My voice sounded small. Childlike. Is this a mistake? Richard leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled together like he was delivering a lecture to a first-year business student. Esther, you've been an asset to this company. A valuable asset. But we're entering a new phase. A new chapter. We need leadership with a different vision. Someone who understands the business side, not just the technical side. Someone who can interface with investors, navigate board politics, think strategically about market positioning. But I built, the words caught in my throat. You built what I told you to build, he interrupted. His voice was calm. Clinical. Like he was discussing the weather. This company is my vision. You executed it well. Extremely well. But execution isn't leadership. Execution isn't strategy. You're a brilliant engineer, Esther. But we need more than engineering now. We need vision. The word vision hit me like a slap. 6 years of my vision. 6 years of my late nights solving problems he couldn't even understand. 6 years of my innovations that he had presented as his own. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the table to make it stop. Richard, I've given 6 years of my life to this company. 6 years. I've missed weddings and funerals and birthdays. I've sacrificed relationships and health and everything else. For this company. For your vision. And you've been compensated fairly, he said, pulling out another document from his briefcase. My original employment contract. The one I'd signed 6 years ago when the company was nothing but a dream and 12 people in a hot office. This contract says we can terminate your employment at will, with or without cause. It also says that any work you create, any intellectual property you develop, belongs to TechVantage Solutions. He held my eyes. His expression was almost pitying. You signed it. Remember. I did remember. I remembered being so excited, so honored to be chosen, so eager to prove myself that I hadn't even read the fine print. I just signed where the HR person pointed and rushed home to tell my mother I had a real job at a real tech company. I was 26 and stupid and full of dreams. Richard stood up slowly. He picked up my contract, the physical copy that had my signature at the bottom, the document that had bound me to this company for 6 years, and walked to the corner of the room where a paper shredder sat on a small table. You know what your problem is, Esther? He held the contract over the shredder's mouth. The machine was off, waiting. You never learned to see the bigger picture. You're brilliant with code, with algorithms, with systems. But you lack vision. You lack the ability to see beyond the immediate technical problem to the larger strategic landscape. He turned on the shredder. It hummed to life, hungry. You built my dreams, Esther. Now go build your own. He fed the contract into the machine. Page by page. The shredder chewed through 6 years of my life in 30 seconds. The sound was terrible. Mechanical and final. Paper turned to confetti, falling into the plastic bin below like snow. Like ashes. The shredding stopped. The machine went quiet. Silence filled the room like poison gas, like something toxic you couldn't see but could feel burning your lungs. He smiled then. Not a cruel smile. Not angry or vindictive. Almost gentle. Almost kind. That made it worse somehow. Consider this a lesson in humility. You're replaceable, Esther. Everyone is. The sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be. He gestured to the door. HR will process your final paycheck. You have until end of day to clear out your desk. Security will escort you out. Standard procedure. Nothing personal. I stood up. My legs were numb. My mind was screaming 1,000 responses, 1,000 defenses, 1,000 pleas. I wanted to tell him that he was nothing without me. That his precious company was built on my work. That every line of code, every algorithm, every innovation that made TechVantage successful came from my mind, my hands, my sleepless nights. I wanted to tell him that he was a fraud. A thief. A man who stole dreams and called them his own. But I said nothing. Not one word. I walked out of that conference room in absolute silence. I walked past the receptionist who wouldn't meet my eyes. Past colleagues who suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Past the posters on the wall showing Richard's face next to the slogan Innovation Through Vision. I walked to my desk in the engineering wing. Someone had already put a cardboard box on my chair. I packed my personal items, a coffee mug my sister had given me, a small plant that had somehow survived 6 years of my neglect, a framed photo of my parents. 20 minutes. 6 years reduced to one small box that I could carry with one hand. Security walked me to the door. Not roughly. Not unkindly. But firmly. Making sure I didn't steal anything on my way out. Making sure the trash they were throwing away didn't try to take anything valuable with it. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears were there, but they felt stuck, frozen behind my eyes. I felt numb. Hollow. Like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything that mattered. My phone buzzed. Text messages from colleagues. What happened? Are you okay? I can't believe they let you go. I turned off my phone. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want pity. I didn't want anything except to understand how I had been so wrong. So blind. So stupid. I drove home in a daze. City traffic swirled around me, taxis and bikes and cars honking, the usual chaos, but I barely noticed. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, unlocked the door, set down the box of my professional life, and sat on my couch. And that's when it hit me. Not sadness. Not grief. Something else. Something colder and sharper and more focused. Clarity. Because in that moment, sitting in my quiet apartment with 6 years of loyalty shredded in a trash bin, I remembered something. Something I had done 3 years ago. Something Richard didn't know about. Let me take you back. 3 years before that Tuesday morning. I was 29, working late as always. It was past midnight. The office was empty except for security guards and the hum of servers. I was finalizing documentation for the AI logistics patent, the big one, the flagship technology that would define the company. Richard had told me to list him as the primary inventor, with me as a contributing engineer. Standard procedure, he'd said. Corporate structure, he'd said. I remember staring at that document on my screen, my finger hovering over the submit button. And I remember feeling something crack inside me. Not breaking. Not shattering. Just a small crack. Like the first line in a windshield before it spreads. It wasn't fair. But more than that, it wasn't true. Richard hadn't invented anything. He'd had an idea, sure. A vague concept. What if we could use AI to optimize logistics in America? But ideas are cheap. Everyone has ideas. I had designed every algorithm. I had written every line of core code. I had solved every impossible problem Richard had thrown at me. I had spent 18 months turning his vague idea into reality. And now he wanted his name on it as the inventor. As if he had created it. As if I had just helped. That night, I made a decision. I contacted a patent attorney. Not the company attorney. Not anyone connected to TechVantage. An independent lawyer I found through a university professor I trusted. I paid for the consultation with my own money. $300 for an hour of advice. What are my rights, I asked, if I develop technology while employed but the company doesn't properly acknowledge my authorship? The attorney was a woman in her 50s named Mrs. Thompson. She had kind eyes and sharp questions. She asked to see my employment contract. She asked about the development process. Who designed what? Who wrote what? Who solved what problems? Here's the situation, she finally said. Your contract says your work belongs to the company. That's standard. But it doesn't say your ideas belong to the company. And patent law is about ideas, not just execution. If you can prove you were the original creator of the core innovations, the foundational concepts that make the technology work, and if the company's documentation is inaccurate about authorship, you have the right to file patents in your own name for those underlying innovations. But I'm an employee, I said. Doesn't everything I create belong to them? She shook her head. Only if they properly document it. Only if the employment agreement specifically assigns patent rights. Only if they follow correct procedures. Most companies are sloppy about this. They assume employment means ownership, but patent law is more complex. She leaned forward. If you want to protect yourself, document everything. Keep detailed records of your development process. And consider filing provisional patents for your core innovations. Not for the final products, those do belong to the company. But for the foundational technologies. The building blocks that make everything else possible. So I did. Over the next 3 years, I quietly, meticulously documented every breakthrough. Every algorithm I created. Every process I designed. Every problem I solved. I kept detailed notebooks with dates and descriptions. I saved emails showing me explaining concepts to Richard. I kept records of meetings where I presented solutions that he then pitched to investors as his own ideas. And I filed patents. 34 of them. One by one. Provisional patents at first, then full utility patents. Not for the finished TechVantage products, those belong to the company. But for the foundational technologies. The core innovations that made everything else possible. The mathematical models for predictive logistics. The novel algorithms for real-time route optimization. the unique data structures I'd invented for handling supply chain complexity. I filed them under my personal legal name. I paid the fees with my savings, thousands of dollars over 3 years, money I could have used for a better apartment or a new car or helping my parents. I kept them completely separate from TechVantage's corporate filings. Different attorney, different patent office accounts, different documentation. And Richard never knew. Because Richard never asked. Richard never wondered how things worked. He just assumed they worked because he had willed them into existence. Because he was the visionary and everyone else was just executing his vision. I didn't do it for revenge. Not then. Not when I was filing them. I did it because I wanted my name on my work. Because I wanted proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I wasn't just a ghost in Richard's machine. I did it because some small part of me, the part that had cracked that midnight 3 years ago, knew that loyalty might not be enough. That fairness might be an illusion. That I needed to protect myself because no one else would. Now, sitting in my apartment on that Tuesday afternoon with my career in a cardboard box, that small crack became a canyon. Because the shredded contract meant something. Something Richard hadn't considered. The shredded contract meant I was no longer bound by any corporate agreement. The termination meant I was no longer an employee. The severance of our relationship meant the murky legal waters around employed inventors were suddenly crystal clear. And the patents, all 34 of them, were mine. Legally. Irrevocably. Completely mine. I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out the fireproof safe where I kept important documents. Inside was a folder. A thick folder. Patent certificates. Filing receipts. Legal documentation. I brought it to my kitchen table, made a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and pulled up the patent database. I spent the next 4 hours running a dependency analysis, cross-referencing TechVantage's products against my patents, mapping every connection, every relationship, every foundation stone. The results made my hands shake. Not from fear. From something else. Power. Understanding. The sudden clarity that comes when you realize the ground beneath your enemy's feet is actually yours. Every major TechVantage product relied on at least 3 of my patents. At least 3 foundational innovations that I owned and they didn't. The flagship AI platform, the one that generated 60% of company revenue, built on 7 of my patents. The new logistics software they were planning to launch next quarter, the one Richard had been pitching to investors as the future of commerce. 12 patents. All mine. The mobile application that 20,000 drivers used every day. 5 patents. Mine. Without my technology, TechVantage couldn't operate. Without licenses to my patents, every product they sold was infringing. Every installation was a violation. Every user was proof of theft. Richard had shredded my contract. But in doing so, he'd severed the only legal protection his company had. Because while I was an employee, the lines were blurry. Company resources, company time, company vision, a court might have ruled in his favor despite my patents. But now? Now I was just a patent holder whose intellectual property was being stolen by a corporation. The law was on my side. Completely. Undeniably. Irrevocably. Richard had shredded my contract. But he just freed me to shred his empire. And I wasn't going to rush. I wasn't going to be emotional. I wasn't going to make the mistake of acting from anger. Because anger is hot and stupid and makes you sloppy. What I felt was cold and clear and patient. I was going to do this right. Strategic. Calculated. Professional. I spent the next 4 days in focused silence. First, I contacted 3 intellectual property attorneys. Different firms. Different specialties. I needed to be absolutely certain my position was unassailable. I met with each one separately, presented my documentation, explained the situation. All 3 said the same thing. These patents are ironclad, said Mr. Johnson, a senior partner at one of New York's top IP firms. The documentation is thorough. The claims are specific. The filing dates prove priority. And TechVantage has been using your intellectual property without license or compensation for 3 years. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. A lawyer's smile. You're sitting on a very strong case. Very strong. Strong enough to shut them down? I asked. Strong enough to own them, he replied. Second, I reached out to Marcus Chen, a former TechVantage board member who had left 2 years ago after disagreeing with Richard's leadership style. Marcus was American Chinese, a venture capitalist who had made his fortune in fintech before moving into logistics. He'd always respected my work. Always asked me technical questions in board meetings instead of just directing everything through Richard. Always seemed frustrated when Richard took credit for my innovations. We'd had coffee a few times. Professional mentorship type conversations. Nothing inappropriate. I texted him. Coffee. He responded within minutes. When? We met at a quiet cafe in Soho the next morning. Marcus looked tired. His startup had failed 6 months ago, I'd heard through the industry grapevine. Esther, he said when we sat down. I heard about your termination. I'm sorry. It's a damn shame. I need your help, I said. Not sympathy. Help. He leaned forward, interested. I'm listening. I explained the patent situation. I showed him the documentation, not all of it, just enough to prove I wasn't bluffing. I watched his eyes widen as he understood the implications. Jesus, he whispered. You're sitting on a nuclear bomb. I know, I said. Which is why I need to handle this carefully. I don't want to destroy the company. I don't want 500 people to lose their jobs because Richard was an arrogant thief. I want to fix what's broken. Marcus sat back. What do you want from me? I need someone the board trusts to vouch for me. I need someone who can frame this correctly. Not as revenge. Not as extortion. But as justice. As proper corporate governance. As protection of shareholder value. He thought about it. You want the CEO position. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. I built that company. I deserve to run it. And I'll run it better than Richard ever did. Marcus smiled then. A real smile. I'll make some calls. Third, I did something that might seem counterintuitive. I contacted Apex Ventures, TechVantage's largest competitor. Not to sell them my patents. Not to destroy TechVantage. But to create pressure. To create urgency. To make sure everyone understood that this situation was time-sensitive. I had a brief phone call with their head of corporate development. I'm calling to inform you, I said, that TechVantage Solutions is currently operating using unlicensed intellectual property. 34 patents that they do not own and do not have rights to use. This represents significant legal exposure for them and a potential market opportunity for their competitors. There was a long pause. And why are you telling us this? Because I believe in fair markets, I said. And because I want everyone to understand the true situation at TechVantage before making business decisions. I hung up. Within 2 hours, Apex Ventures' legal team had sent a letter to TechVantage's board asking them to clarify their IP position for a potential acquisition discussion. Pressure. Just enough to make the board panic. 1 week after my termination, TechVantage's board of directors received a certified letter from Mr. Johnson's firm. I'd paid him a substantial retainer. This needed to be done right. The letter was beautifully crafted. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just factual and devastating. Notice of patent infringement. 34 registered patents held by Esther. Usage without license or compensation. The letter included complete documentation. Patent numbers. Filing dates. Detailed dependency maps showing exactly how each TechVantage product relied on my innovations. Technical breakdowns that proved beyond doubt that the company's entire technology stack was built on intellectual property they didn't own. The letter also included a proposed resolution. Ms. Esther is willing to license these patents to TechVantage Solutions under reasonable terms to be negotiated. However, time is of the essence as continued unlicensed usage represents significant daily liability. It was professional. Reasonable. Terrifying. The board panicked. Exactly as I'd known they would. Emergency meeting called for the next morning. Richard was summoned. All board members were required to attend in person. I imagine that meeting. I wasn't there, but Marcus told me later what happened. Richard walked in confident, probably expecting to discuss the Apex Ventures inquiry. maybe thinking he'd squashed another competitor's attempt to poach clients. Then Patricia Coleman, the lead investor from Silicon Valley, the woman who had bet $10 million on Richard's vision, slid the letter across the table to him. "What the hell is this?" she asked. Her voice was ice. Richard scanned the document. Marcus said his face went white. Literally drained of color. This is impossible. Esther worked for us. Everything she built belongs to the company. Her contract that you shredded." Patricia interrupted. The room went silent. "Tell me, Richard. Tell me you had her sign proper intellectual property assignment agreements. Tell me you followed correct patent procedures. Tell me we're not about to lose everything because you were too arrogant to do basic corporate governance." Richard opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. We had standard employment contracts." "Standard employment contracts," said James Morrison, the corporate attorney who sat on the board, "are not sufficient for patent protection. I've reviewed Ms. Esther's filings. They're legitimate. She developed these innovations independently, documented the process meticulously, and filed properly. And because she's no longer an employee, because you terminated her, the company has no claim whatsoever." Patricia stood up. I imagine her pacing. She was known for her intensity. "So let me be clear. Our entire product line is built on technology we don't own. Technology owned by a woman you just fired. A woman whose contract you literally shredded as some kind of power play. Is that correct?" Silence. "Is that correct?" "Yes," Richard finally whispered. "How long?" asked another investor. "How long before this becomes public knowledge?" "It's already public," said Marcus quietly. He'd been sitting there watching. "Apex Ventures knows. They've already sent an inquiry. Which means by tomorrow, every competitor will know. Every investor in the sector will know. Every client will question whether our products will keep working. Our stock price is going to crash." "We could fight this in court," Richard said desperately. "We could argue that she developed these innovations using company resources, during company time. We could lose," James interrupted. "And we would lose. I've reviewed the documentation. Her case is airtight. She kept personal notebooks. She used personal equipment for key development. She can prove independent creation. And even if we had a case, even if we could argue employment claims, the litigation would take years. Years during which we cannot operate. Years during which our clients leave. Years during which this company bleeds to death." "How much is she asking?" Patricia's voice was tight. Controlled. "She hasn't asked for anything yet," said James. "The letter just establishes infringement and offers to negotiate. We don't know her terms." My phone rang that afternoon. Exactly 36 hours after the board received my letter. Richard. I looked at his name on my screen for a long moment. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, just to make him wait. Just to let him feel what it's like when someone has power over you and you're helpless. On the 5th ring, I answered. "Esther." His voice was strained, desperate, all the smooth confidence gone. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I kept my voice neutral, calm, like I was talking to a stranger about the weather. "Please. This can be resolved. Come to the office. Let's discuss this like adults." "I'm no longer an employee, Richard. I don't come to your office anymore." Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. "What do you want?" he finally asked. The question I'd been waiting for. The question he'd forced me to answer by trying to erase me. "We'll discuss that tomorrow," I said. "Conference room A, 9 a.m. The entire board should attend. Have your attorney there. I'll have mine." "Esther, please." I hung up. Not angrily. Just firmly. Decisively. The way you end a conversation when you're the one with power. I slept well that night. Better than I had in years. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not the nervous outfit of someone hoping for a promotion. The confident outfit of someone who already has power and is simply there to formalize it. I wore a tailored black suit. Professional. Strong. I wore my mother's pearl earrings for luck. I arrived at the TechVantage building at 8:55 a.m. The security guard who'd escorted me out a week ago looked confused. Ms. Esther? I thought, I have a meeting with the board, I said calmly. Conference room A. I walked through the lobby. Heads turned. Whispers followed me. The woman who'd been fired was back. What was happening? I took the elevator to the top floor. Walked down the familiar hallway. Stopped outside conference room A. Took a deep breath. Opened the door. The entire board was there. Patricia Coleman. Marcus Chun. 3 other investors whose money built the empire. James Morrison, the attorney. 2 more lawyers I didn't recognize. And Richard, sitting at the head of the table. Exactly where he'd sat when he'd shredded my contract. But this time, he looked small. Diminished. Afraid. I walked to the other end of the table. Set down my briefcase. My attorney, Mr. Johnson, entered behind me and took the seat next to mine. The power dynamic in the room had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Esther, Patricia began carefully. Her voice was professional. Respectful. Everything it hadn't been when I was just an employee. We've reviewed your patents. We acknowledge your legal position. We'd like to negotiate a licensing agreement that's fair to all parties. I opened my briefcase. Pulled out a folder. I've prepared a proposal, I said. My voice was steady. Clear. I'd practiced this. The patents will be licensed back to TechVantage Solutions under specific terms. I slid copies of my proposal across the table. 1 for each board member. I watched them read. Watched Patricia's eyebrows rise. Watched the lawyers exchange glances. Watched Richard's hands begin to shake. You want the CEO position, Patricia said slowly. Yes, I said. And a 15% equity stake. And seats on the board for myself and 2 additional members to be approved by me. And Richard's immediate resignation with a standard severance package. Richard shot to his feet. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is absurd. You can't waltz in here and demand to take over the company I built. I can, I said calmly, keeping my eyes on Patricia, not on Richard. Because without my patents, TechVantage cannot operate. Every product launch will be blocked. Every client contract will be invalid. Every piece of software will be unlicensed. The company will face immediate legal action from multiple parties. You'll be forced to halt all operations within 30 days. Within 90 days, you'll be bankrupt. We could fight this in court, Richard said desperately. You said that yesterday, I replied. And your own attorney explained why you'd lose. This isn't about whether I'm right. I am right. The patents prove it. The documentation proves it. The law proves it. This is about whether you want to save the company or let your ego destroy 500 jobs. I turned to Patricia. Or you can accept my terms. I become CEO. Richard exits with dignity and proper compensation. The company continues operating under proper licenses. Your investment is protected. The employees keep their jobs. And TechVantage can actually grow into what it should have been all along, a company that values creation over credit, substance over image, justice over ego. One of the other investors, a man named David Chun, no relation to Marcus, spoke up. Why should we trust you to run this company? You're an engineer, not a CEO. You're right, I said. I'm an engineer. An engineer who built the technology that made this company worth $200 million. An engineer who has spent 6 years understanding every aspect of this business from the ground up. An engineer who has learned exactly what kind of leadership destroys a company's culture and what kind builds it. And I'm an engineer who was smart enough to protect her own work when her CEO was too busy taking credit to do proper corporate governance. I let that sink in. The question isn't whether I can run this company better than Richard. The question is whether any of you want to find out what happens if I don't. If I license these patents to Apex Ventures instead. If I start my own company with this technology. If I simply refuse to license them at all and watch TechVantage collapse while I build something new from the ashes. The room was silent. Richard slumped back into his chair. His face was red. Whether from anger or humiliation or both, I couldn't tell. I didn't care. Patricia looked at James Morrison. Legally, what's our position? James adjusted his glasses. She has us completely. The patents are legitimate. The infringement is clear. We have no leverage. Our only options are to accept her terms or to begin liquidation proceedings. This is extortion, Richard said quietly. His voice had lost all its power, all its charisma. He sounded like what he was, a man watching his empire slip away. No, I said, looking at him directly for the first time. This is consequence. I stood up, walked slowly around the table toward him. You shredded my contract, Richard. You told me I was replaceable. You said I lacked vision. You taught me that loyalty means nothing, that credit belongs to whoever takes it, that power matters more than fairness. I stopped a few feet from his chair. You said I should go build my own dream. So I did. And my dream is this company, run the right way. With fairness. With integrity. Where people who create get credit for their creations. Where employees are valued, not discarded. Where vision means seeing the people around you, not just seeing yourself. I built this company, Richard said. But his voice was hollow. He knew it wasn't true. He'd always known. No, I said gently. Almost kindly. We built it. All of us. The engineers who worked late nights. The designers who perfected the interfaces. The customer service people who listened to clients. The operations team that made everything run smoothly. We built it together. And you tried to erase us from the story. You tried to make it only about you. I turned back to the board. I'm not asking you to punish Richard. I'm not asking you to destroy him. I'm asking you to make the right choice. For the company. For the employees. For the investors. For everyone who depends on TechVantage to succeed. Patricia closed the folder in front of her. We need to vote. Board members only. Esther, Richard, attorneys, please step outside. I picked up my briefcase. Walked to the door. Mr. Johnson followed me. Richard stood up slowly, like an old man, and shuffled out. We stood in the hallway. The three of us. Richard wouldn't look at me. He stared at the floor. At the expensive carpet he'd chosen when the company could finally afford the penthouse floor. I'm sorry, he said suddenly. Quietly. I hadn't expected that. What? I said I'm sorry. He looked up. His eyes were red. You deserved better. You deserved credit. You deserved everything. And I took it because I could. Because that's what CEOs do. That's what I thought success looked like. It's too late for sorry, I said. Not cruelly. Just factually. Sorry doesn't give me back 6 years. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation. Sorry doesn't fix the broken system that let you steal my work. I know, he said. I know. We stood in silence. Mr. Johnson checked his phone, giving us privacy. For what it's worth, Richard said, you'll be a better CEO than I was. You'll actually care about the people. I just cared about the image. About being the visionary. About seeing my name in magazines. I know, I said. And I did. I'd always known. That was the tragedy of it. The door opened. Patricia stepped out. We've reached a decision. We filed back in. Everyone sat. Patricia remained standing. The board has voted unanimously, she said. Her voice was formal. Official. We accept Ms. Esther's terms. Effective immediately, Esther is appointed Chief Executive Officer of TechVantage Solutions with a 15% equity stake and board representation. Richard Kane will resign and receive standard severance as outlined in his contract. She looked at me. Welcome to leadership, Esther. I nodded. I didn't smile. This wasn't a victory. Not really. This was justice. There's a difference. Richard stood up. Extended his hand. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I shook it. Not for him. For closure. Good luck, he said. You'll need it. I have something better than luck, I replied. I have competence. The next few weeks were chaos. Organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Richard cleaned out his office. I moved in, not into his penthouse space, but into a modest office on the engineering floor. I wanted to be close to the work, not above it. I hired a new chief technology officer, a woman named Sarah from a competitor company who had been overlooked for promotion 3 times despite building their entire back-end infrastructure. I knew exactly how that felt. I promoted 3 engineers who had been passed over. I restructured the compensation system to include proper equity for key contributors. I reviewed every patent filed in the company's history and corrected authorship where needed. Several engineers suddenly found themselves listed on patents they'd actually created but never received credit for. The morale shift was immediate. People started smiling in the hallways again. The whispered conversations stopped being about fear and layoffs and started being about projects and innovations. I held an all-hands meeting in my second week. 500 employees crammed into the cafeteria and overflow rooms with video feeds. I stood at the front without notes. My name is Esther. Most of you know me from the engineering department. I built the AI systems that power our products. And as of 2 weeks ago, I'm your new CEO. I know there are questions. I know there's uncertainty. So let me be clear about what's going to change and what's going to stay the same. I took a breath. What's changing? We're going to value people over image. We're going to give credit where credit is due. We're going to make sure that when you build something, your name is on it. We're going to create clear paths to advancement based on merit, not politics. We're going to be transparent about company performance, challenges, and opportunities. What's staying the same? We're still going to build world-class logistics technology. We're still going to serve our clients with excellence. We're still going to innovate and push boundaries. We're still going to grow. But we're going to do it together. As a team. Not as a cult of personality around one person. A hand went up in the back. A young engineer I recognized from the mobile team. What happened with Mr. Kane? Why did he leave? I'd been expecting this question. Richard and I had fundamental disagreements about company values and leadership philosophy. The board agreed that a change was necessary. Richard received fair compensation and left on professional terms. I respect what he built, but I believe we can build something better. Something more sustainable. Something that values every person who contributes. Another hand. A woman from operations. Are there going to be more layoffs? Not under my leadership, I said firmly. The restructuring talks that happened before my appointment are over. Everyone here has value. Everyone here matters. If we're successful, when we're successful, it will be because all of us succeeded together. The room was quiet. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room. I hadn't expected that. I'd expected skepticism, questions, doubt. Instead, I saw relief. Hope. People were tired of being afraid. Tired of being invisible. They wanted leadership that saw them. My first major strategic decision came 3 weeks into my tenure. Apex Ventures, our biggest competitor, approached with an acquisition offer. $250 million. Nearly 25% more than our current valuation. Patricia called an emergency board meeting. This is a good exit, she said. Everyone makes money. Clean and simple. No, I said. The room went quiet. No. We're worth more, I said. Not on paper. Not right now. But in 12 months, we'll be worth double that. I have a product roadmap that will transform the logistics space. I have the technology, legally this time. I have the team. And I have something Richard never had, the trust of the people building the products. That's a big risk, said David Chen. What if you're wrong? Then you can fire me and sell to Apex at a discount, I replied. But give me 12 months. Let me show you what this company can really do when it's run right. The board voted. 4 in favor of selling. 3 in favor of my plan. Marcus abstained because he'd advised me and didn't want the conflict of interest. Patricia, as the deciding vote, looked at me for a long moment. 12 months, she finally said. You have 12 months to prove this wasn't a mistake. I won't need that long, I said. I was right. 6 months later, TechVantage launched 3 new products. A driver management system that reduced delivery times by 30%. An AI-powered demand forecasting tool that cut client inventory costs by 40%. A mobile platform for small businesses that made enterprise-level logistics accessible to mom-and-pop shops across North America. Every product launch included credits. Not just the CEO's name. Not just the company name. Individual contributors. The engineers who built the algorithms. The designers who created the interfaces. The operations people who tested everything. Real people with real names doing real work. The tech media noticed. TechCrunch ran a feature. TechVantage's new CEO is revolutionizing corporate credit and employee recognition. Forbes did a profile, the woman who took back her company, and made it better. CNN interviewed me for their Business Leaders series. The reporter asked, "Do you regret how this happened? Do you wish Richard had just treated you fairly from the start?" I thought about it carefully. I wish I hadn't needed to protect myself. I wish I could have trusted that my work would speak for itself. But I learned something important. Your work only speaks for itself if you make sure your name is on it. If you create systems that value truth over hierarchy. If you build environments where stealing credit is impossible because everyone can see who did what. "What would you say to other women in tech who feel invisible?" she asked. I looked directly at the camera. Document everything. Keep records. Know your worth in concrete, provable terms. Don't just work hard, work smart. Protect yourself legally. And understand that silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is build something undeniable while everyone else is talking. The interview went viral. Women from across the world reached out. Engineers who'd had their work stolen. Designers who'd been overlooked. Scientists whose discoveries were credited to their bosses. "You gave us hope," one email said. "You showed us that justice is possible." But it wasn't just women. Young men reached out too. People of all backgrounds who'd been underestimated, overlooked, erased. "You showed us that power doesn't have to be loud," one wrote. "That revenge doesn't have to be destructive. That you can win by being excellent." 9 months after I became CEO, Richard sent me an email. The subject line was just one word: congratulations. I opened it. "Esther, I've been following your success. I won't pretend I'm not bitter. I built that company from nothing, and watching someone else lead it stings. But I'm impressed. Truly. Revenue is up 40%. Employee satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been. You're doing things I never could have done. You're building something I was too blind to see. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about a lot of things. I thought leadership was about vision, about one person seeing the future and dragging everyone else toward it. But you've shown that real leadership is about seeing the people around you. About elevating them. About making sure everyone's contribution is visible and valued. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have seen you. I should have valued you. I should have recognized that the company's success was your success. I was too busy trying to be the hero of the story to realize that the best stories don't have heroes, they have teams." He continued, "I've started teaching now. Business ethics at NYU. Trying to make sure the next generation doesn't make my mistakes. Trying to teach young entrepreneurs that there's a difference between ambition and ego. Between confidence and arrogance. Between leadership and theft. I tell your story in my classes. With your permission, I hope. I tell them about the brilliant engineer I hired who built my company. And how I was too stupid to see her. And how she had to take extraordinary steps to get the credit she deserved. I tell them it's a cautionary tale. About what happens when you confuse your role with your value. When you think being CEO means you created everything. Some students think you were too harsh. That you destroyed my career. But I tell them the truth. You could have destroyed me. You could have buried me. You could have made sure I never worked in tech again. Instead, you just replaced me. You took what you'd built and ran it properly. That's not revenge. That's justice. Thank you for that. Thank you for being better than I deserved. Richard." I read the email 3 times. I thought about responding. About saying something profound or forgiving or final. Instead, I archived it. Not out of cruelty. Not out of bitterness. But because some chapters close not with a conversation, but with silence. With the simple act of moving forward. 12 months after I became CEO, exactly when I'd promised Patricia results, TechVantage's valuation hit $400 million. Exactly double what we'd been worth when I took over. The board meeting that afternoon was celebratory. Champagne was poured. Toasts were made. To Esther, Patricia said, raising her glass, who proved that doing the right thing can also be the profitable thing. To the team, I corrected, raising my glass, who did the actual work. That night, I drove to my parents' house in New Jersey. My mother answered the door with her usual warmth. Esther, we saw you on television again. Everyone in the neighborhood is talking. My father was in the living room, watching the news. He muted it when I walked in. Are you eating enough? He asked. You look thin. I laughed. Some things never change. I'm eating, Papa. I promise. We sat together. I told them about the valuation, about the success, about the 12 months of chaos and growth and transformation. I'm proud of you, my mother said. She was crying a little. Not because of the money. Not because you're a CEO. But because you didn't let them break you. Because you stood up for yourself. Because you showed them that our daughter, our brilliant, stubborn daughter, cannot be erased. My father nodded. Your grandmother would have liked this story. She always said that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. Because while everyone else is talking, the quiet ones are thinking. Is that what you were doing? My mother asked. When he fired you. When he shredded your contract. Were you thinking? Yes, I said. I was thinking that he just made the biggest mistake of his life. And I was thinking about how to make sure he understood that. Without rage. Without destruction. Just with consequences. My father smiled. That's my daughter. Not hot-tempered like me. Patient like your mother. Patient enough to let people defeat themselves. 2 years after I became CEO, TechVantage went public. Initial public offering. Stock market. The whole dramatic process of taking a private company and making it public. We were valued at $1.2 billion. I owned 15% of that. $180 million on paper. Numbers that didn't feel real. Numbers that felt like someone else's life. The night before the IPO, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment. I still lived in the same modest place in Brooklyn, though I could afford much better now, and thought about the journey. 6 years of invisible work. 1 moment of betrayal. 4 days of strategy. 1 meeting that changed everything. And now this. The culmination of every late night, every stolen credit, every moment I'd been told I lacked vision. I thought about all the people who'd helped me. Mrs. Thompson, the patent attorney who'd shown me how to protect myself. Marcus Chun, who'd vouched for me when the board was skeptical. Mr. Johnson, who'd crafted the legal strategy that made my position unassailable. Sarah and the other engineers who'd trusted me to lead them. My parents, who'd raised me to value justice over revenge. And I thought about Richard. About the man who'd taught me the most important lesson of my life, that loyalty without self-protection is just vulnerability. That trust without documentation is just hope. That excellence without recognition is just free labor. The IPO was successful. The stock opened at $38 per share and closed the first day at $45. I was suddenly, on paper, worth more than $200 million. The media went crazy. From fired engineer to billionaire CEO. The ultimate corporate comeback story. How one woman turned betrayal into empire. But the story I was proudest of wasn't in the business press. It was in a small tech blog written by a young woman named Emily. She was 23, working at a startup, dealing with a boss who was taking credit for her code. I was ready to quit, she wrote. I was ready to walk away from tech entirely. I was tired of being invisible. But then I read about Esther. About how she documented her work. About how she protected herself. About how she turned silence into power. So I started keeping detailed records. I started filing my own technical documentation. I started building my own proof. And when my boss tried to present my project as his own at a board meeting, I had receipts. Every line of code. Every commit. Every email. Every decision. I didn't quit. I got him fired. And I got his job. She continued, "Thank you, Ms. Esther. You showed me that we don't have to accept invisibility. We don't have to accept theft. We can protect ourselves. We can demand justice. And we can win, not through anger, but through preparation. Through strategy. Through being undeniable." I read that blog post 3 times. And I cried. Not sad tears. Proud tears. Because that's what it was all about, wasn't it? Not my personal victory. But the message. The precedent. The proof that the system could be beaten if you were smart enough, patient enough, strategic enough. 3 years after I became CEO, I was invited to speak at a Women in Technology conference in Toronto. The audience was hundreds of women, engineers, entrepreneurs, students, dreamers. I stood on that stage and told my story. Not the sanitized version. Not the PR-friendly version. The real version. He shredded my contract because he thought I was paper, I said. Disposable. Replaceable. Something that could be thrown away when it was no longer useful. But I wasn't paper. I was the blueprint. I was the foundation. I was the architecture that held his empire together. And when he tried to throw me away, I showed him that you cannot build a house and then pretend the foundation doesn't exist. Eventually, the truth holds you up or tears you down. I paused. I'm not here to tell you that revenge is good. I'm not here to say that every betrayal should be met with calculated destruction. I'm here to tell you that documentation is power. That preparation is protection. That your name on your work is not vanity, it's survival. A woman in the audience raised her hand. What if we're not as smart as you? What if we can't file patents and build legal cases? You don't have to be a genius, I said. You just have to be consistent. Keep a notebook. Date your entries. Save your emails. Document your contributions in shared documents that have timestamps. Take photos of whiteboards after brainstorming sessions. Create a paper trail of your existence. Because someday, someone might try to erase you. And when they do, you need to be able to prove that you were always there. Another hand. What if they fire us for being difficult? For asking for credit? Then document that too, I said. Document the retaliation. And understand that a company willing to fire you for demanding basic fairness is not a company worth working for. You will find better. You will build better. And sometimes, the best thing that can happen to you is being freed from a place that doesn't value you. The applause was thunderous. After my talk, dozens of women lined up to speak with me. To thank me. To share their own stories of stolen credit and invisible work. One woman in particular stood out. She was older than the others. Maybe 50. Gray hair. Tired eyes. I worked in tech for 25 years, she said. I never got the recognition you got. I never fought back like you did. I just survived. And eventually, I left. I gave up. She took my hand. But my daughter is studying computer science now. And because of you, I can tell her, document everything. Protect yourself. Don't make my mistakes. You've given me something to tell her that I didn't have, a story where the brilliant woman wins. I hugged her. This stranger. This woman who represented thousands of others who'd been erased by systems that valued image over substance. Thank you for surviving, I whispered. Thank you for raising a daughter who will do better. That night, alone in my hotel room, I let myself feel the weight of it all. The responsibility. The symbol I'd become. The expectations. It would have been easier in some ways, to stay invisible. To take the severance and disappear. To build something new somewhere else. But I hadn't done it just for me. I'd done it for every Esther who came after. Every person whose work was stolen. Every voice that was silenced. Every contribution that was erased. For years after I became CEO, Richard reached out again. Not by email this time. He called my office. My assistant told me he was on the line. I almost declined the call. But curiosity won. Richard, I said when I picked up. Esther. His voice sounded older. Tired. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. But I wanted to tell you something. In person, if possible. We met at a quiet restaurant in Soho. Neutral ground. He looked different. Thinner. Grayer. Less polished. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by casual clothes that looked comfortable but ordinary. We ordered drinks. Sat in silence for a moment. "I'm dying," he finally said. I felt my stomach drop. "What?" "Cancer. Stage 4. 6 months, maybe less. The doctors are optimistic that I might see Christmas, but..." He shrugged. "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it. Whatever had happened between us, I didn't wish that on anyone. "Don't be," he said. "I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you because dying clarifies things. Makes you think about legacy. About what you leave behind." He took a sip of water. "I've been thinking about my legacy. And I realized that my real legacy isn't TechVantage. Isn't the products or the patents or the money. My real legacy is you." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I created you," he said. "Not your brilliance, that was always yours. Not your talent, you came with that. But I created your strength. Your strategic thinking. Your understanding that the world isn't fair and you have to protect yourself." He smiled sadly. "I taught you, through my cruelty and arrogance, how to be powerful. How to play the long game. How to turn silence into a weapon. And now you're teaching thousands of others. That's my legacy. I made you into what you are by trying to destroy you." I thought about that. "You didn't make me strong, Richard. You revealed how strong I already was. There's a difference." "Maybe," he conceded. "But I wanted to say thank you. For not destroying me completely. For letting me teach. For giving me a chance to fix some of the damage I did. For being better than I was." "You're welcome," I said. We finished our drinks. Talked about smaller things. His family. My parents. The industry. When we parted, he hugged me. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "I know I have no right to be. But I am." I watched him walk away. This man who had shaped my life so profoundly. This villain who had accidentally been my greatest teacher. I never saw him again. He died 5 months later. I sent flowers to the funeral but didn't attend. Some chapters need to close completely. 5 years after I became CEO, TechVantage was operating in 15 countries. We had 3,000 employees. We'd acquired 2 smaller companies and launched products that were industry standards. And I was tired. Not burned out. Not unhappy. Just tired. I'd proved what I needed to prove. I'd built what I needed to build. I'd shown that stolen credit could be reclaimed and that justice was possible. I promoted Sarah to CEO. She'd earned it. She was brilliant and fair and exactly what the company needed. I stayed on the board but stepped back from day-to-day operations. I started a foundation. The Esther Foundation for Innovation and Recognition. We provided legal support to people fighting for credit on their intellectual property. We funded patent filings for innovators who couldn't afford the fees. We created documentation systems for companies to properly track contributions. We taught workshops on protecting your work. The first person we helped was a young man named Michael. He'd invented a water purification system while working at an NGO. His boss had filed the patent under the NGO's name without listing Michael as an inventor. We helped him challenge it. We won. His name went on the patent. He cried when he called to tell me. "You gave me back my dignity," he said. "No," I replied. "You earned your dignity by creating something beautiful. I just helped you keep it." 10 years after that Tuesday morning when Richard shredded my contract, I was invited back to TechVantage for a company celebration. A decade of success. They'd renamed the main conference room the Esther Innovation Center. There was a plaque on the wall, in honor of the woman who showed us that true vision means seeing the people around you. I gave a short speech. 10 years ago, I sat in a conference room and watched my contract get shredded. I watched 6 years of my life turn into confetti. And I felt small. Powerless. Erased. But I wasn't erased. Because you cannot erase ideas. You cannot erase creation. You cannot erase the truth of who built what. You can ignore it. You can steal credit for it. But the truth remains, waiting for someone brave enough to prove it. I looked at the audience. So many young faces. So many people who joined after my time. I'm not a hero, I continued. I'm not special. I'm just someone who documented her work. Who protected herself. Who understood that silence is sometimes the loudest weapon. And who got lucky that the law was on my side. But here's what I want you to remember. You are not lucky to have a job. Your company is lucky to have you. Your work has value. Your contributions matter. Your name deserves to be on what you create. And if someone tries to erase you, you have the right, and the responsibility, to prove they can't. The applause was long and loud. Afterwards, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 24. Nervous. Excited. "Ms. Esther," she said. "I'm Emily. I'm a junior engineer here. And I just want to say thank you. Because of you, I knew to document my work from day one. Because of you, when my manager tried to take credit for my algorithm last month, I had proof. I showed it to HR. He was reprimanded. I was promoted. Because of you." I smiled. "Not because of me. Because you were smart enough to protect yourself. I just showed you it was necessary." "Still," she said, "you changed things. You made it possible for people like me to stand up. To fight back. To win." And that, I thought, was the real victory. Not the money. Not the title. Not revenge. The real victory was that young woman standing in front of me, empowered and protected and ready to fight for herself. That's what it was all about. That's what it had always been about. They ask me sometimes, in leadership panels and conference keynotes, was it worth it? The revenge. And I tell them the truth. It wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud. Revenge is destructive. Revenge is burning down the house because you weren't invited to dinner. What I did was justice. I didn't destroy Richard Kane. I replaced him. And there's a difference. Destruction is easy. Anyone with a match can burn a building. But building something better? That takes vision. That takes patience. That takes the ability to play the long game while everyone else is thinking 3 moves ahead. Richard shredded my contract because he thought I was paper. But I wasn't paper. I was the blueprint. And you can shred paper. But you cannot erase an idea whose time has come. You cannot erase a truth that's been properly documented. You cannot erase a person who has made themselves undeniable. My name is Esther. I'm 42 years old now. And I'm the woman who took back what was stolen and turned it into something bigger than revenge. Something better than anger. I turned betrayal into justice. Silence into power. Invisibility into legacy. People ask what they should learn from my story. I tell them, protect your work. Document everything. Your name on your creation is not vanity, it's survival. Fight for recognition, not because you're petty, but because the next person deserves a world where their work is automatically valued. Be patient. Strategy beats emotion every time. And understand that sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't anger, it's excellence. Sometimes the best revenge is just being undeniable. Richard shredded my contract. But I rewrote the future. Not just mine. But for everyone who comes after me. Everyone who will face their own Richard. Everyone who will need to remember that silence is power, that documentation is protection, and that justice is always possible if you're smart enough to prove the truth. He shredded my contract. I shredded his legacy. And I built something better in its place. Checkmate. Please like, comment, and share. If this is your first time watching my video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you'll be notified whenever I post a new story.